Welcome everyone, and I'm so glad you're here to celebrate this panel of debut authors. I'm Angela Chaidez Vincent, and if I haven't met you yet, and you're in the MFA program, I might be like your weird auntie from class of 2006 who's obsessed with female gladiators, not the Roman Empire, a specific subset, yeah. I want to see, how many current MFA students are out here right now? All right, I see some current MFA students. How about MFA alumni? Yeah! and then the rest of you must be friends and family who are making sure that they don't tell that story about you. Yeah. All right, we have 3 fantastic readers, and I have had the pleasure of reading each of their debut collections, and the pleasure of introducing each of them to you. We're going to start with Gabriel Ibarra, and he is the author of On Display from Gunpowder Press. That came out this year, 2023. He's the co-winner of the Alta California Chapbook Prize, and this was selected by Francisco Aragon. Gabriel was born and raised in California's central San Joaquin Valley, and he attended Fresno State College, earned a bachelor's degree in literature, creative writing from UC Santa Cruz. I'm so jealous because I always wanted to be a banana slug. Didn't happen. After graduating, he worked at a local Good Neighbor pharmacy and then at a local newspaper where he found himself drafting poems rather than typing or selling ads, which ultimately led him to earn an MFA from Creative Writing Poetry from Fresno State. His poetry has been published in the Packing House Review, and he earned an honorable mention for the Ernesto Trejo Memorial Prize from the Academy of American Poets, selected by Philip Levine. To honor his roots as a cuentista, he has served as a Puente Program mentor at Fresno State College. He currently writes, teaches, and lives here in Fresno with his wife, Marina, and 2 sons, Andrew and Emiliano. In his debut chapbook, On Display, give me just a moment. I did one of those things where I wrote down what I wanted to say, and it's like, go to page 2. No. Yep, here it is. I tabbed it. There we go. In his debut chapbook, On Display, love built with a fierce and complex insistence scaffolds the devastating imagery of these poems. In the poem, The Aluminum Baseball Bat, the same hand that cracks open a beloved face later holds a Budweiser, this hand shining with the very water rinsed away by the blood. This collection is haunted by a stillborn older brother. It finds and defends a father figure in the pixelated and staticky image of Eric Estrada from 70s TV show Chips. It stretches fears and hopes into the future in an epistolary poem to an unborn child. Its origin story, witness account, close observation through gritted teeth. Its language, rhythmic, and spell casting. Without further delay, our first reader, Gabriel Ibarra.
Thank you, Angela. Hopefully I can live up to what you said, and my words actually resonate with you out there in the crowd. Full disclosure, I may get emotional as these poems are really hard. So if I get teary or a little choked up, it's because I'm sort of back in the moment and reflecting. So, as Angela said, yes, Eric Estrada appears in my poem. And it's one thing to take pop culture and put it in a poem, but it's another thing to make others feel like they know who that is. So here's the first poem. Eric Estrada plays my father. Sitting on my chip's big wheel, she tells me, "Mira, tu papi is on TV." I'm right next to him on the beach, at his desk, learning his trade, wishing I could be him or one of his 5 make-believe children, going to Disneyland. And when his cop friends make fun of his name, Poncherelli, I'd use my anger as a superpower, my abandonment as wit, call them pinche gringos, and ride off on his motorcycle. Our time together, episodes, rerun, is never real. Only instances of his dark, oily hair mirroring mine as I pedal closer, reach out, and trace the static of his face. So, I look at this chapbook as my EP until my full length comes out. And I was very conscious of making it as tight as possible, as focused as possible. But later, when I end my reading, I'm going to read new poems. They're in the next phase. So, the next poem I'm going to read is, it's not about fathers, it's about a mom. So the mom doesn't get away. Okay. Titled Visiting Hours. And also with this one, since I'm at Fresno State and I went to Fresno State and it's an alumni thing, I took a class with Phil Levine that was not a class. It was this thing that we had to submit work to, and then he said you could come in. And this poem, he said to me, has power. And that made it real. So here it is, Visiting Hours. Behind the solid glass is your mother, and in a dull-colored jumpsuit, the opposite of her usual bright blouses. You sit at the end of the line as your older sister talks through a single black phone with no numbers, and you feel something clench, your stomach, your fingers, your toes. You look around the detainment room, barely lit, the smell of humid skin and ammonia drifts along with each. I love you, I miss you, when are you coming home? It's your turn to tell your mom how you're doing, but her eyes are puffy and darker than you remember, and you start to say, I'm fine, but you can't even say I'm without your lips shaking, and that something you tried to understand bursts and heaves. As you press your hand against the glass, the foam drops from your ear. And as Angela said, there are a lot of things that strand throughout, images, ideas, and glass is one of them. Mirrors, glass, a lot of them. So, the last poem I'm going to read from the collection, there's 12 in there. Hopefully you buy a book over there, and there's my Instagram handle there. You can scan and follow me along later, okay? But the last collection I'm going to read is about, well, actually, it came from a poem that I read from in a workshop while I was here at Fresno State by the wonderfully talented Michelle Brynn Rosado, where she talked about oral surgery, and so then I wrote a poem about oral surgery, and here it is. So, after oral surgery, it's a ground ball to the chin from a bad hop. The seams of the baseball grafted onto your skin. Your bottom lip swells, and the holes you can't see just taste. Blood at the back of your throat like warm metal, and the gauze you wad up in the hollow crevices absorb, pulling saliva. You don't swallow, choke the aftertaste of pain pills and antibiotics, and before the surgeon puts you under, he asks again what you do, and you say, I write poetry. And you aren't completely under, can hear his choice of Phil Collins, the suction to the cut of your gums and the tug of the forceps, all while unable to say, I can feel that. And the wisdom teeth lie on the shiny tin plate, and the smell of meals and binges collected over 30 years, tolerated like a childhood memories of a father you never really knew, but wondered if in some way he has always been there, hidden down deep like your teeth. So that is a true story. I did take a bad hop in the infield on shitty baseball fields in Fresno. And this next poem is a newer poem. Well, not newer. In my thesis that is in Jefferson's office that lays there, a lot of these poems are in there, and this was one of them that I just sort of made different than what's there in that manuscript. It's titled Little League. I see you alone on a hook. Lust over your genuine leather, smell, and anticipate the smile of your arm. As I glance at you between batters and outs. During practice, I chew on your loose strings as a pop fly sails over me at shortstop and wait for the cutoff throw. At home, I'll break you in with a slap to your inner thigh, bend your webbed figure inward, widen your sweet spot. Every night, I'll place a baseball inside you, and no matter how many times you let me down, a ball through my legs or a bat hop off your side onto my chin, and I throw you down on the infield dirt and say I hate you, I will always pick you up, put you back on, and try again. So yeah, baseball, big thing. It's the cover of the book, has a bat on there, so it's important to me. So this last poem I'm going to read, which is really, really new. It's only in the second draft. If I can say so, it's dedicated to my friend Jefferson. Because I would not have submitted this manuscript if it wasn't for Jefferson. Because he told me to do my homework, and I did. And it worked out. Love you too, man. Okay, so after a visit to the doctor, the trees need to be trimmed and the hedges should be shaped and the weeds shouldn't grow there like this. Unless you aren't doing what I said and the Roundup is collecting dust like my advice, the house I told you how to care for, because complacency is a chronic disease like diabetes. Another thing I asked about. And when the ants appear around the edges of your thinning lawn, you said, tomorrow, tomorrow. Thank you.
One of my favorite things about this event is how much love's in the room. Let's give another round of applause for Gabriel Ibarra. Definitely recommend that you pick up a copy of On Display. And for those of us that might think that's not an option, there are other ways to support. Leaving reviews, following on Instagram. Do one of those things and help out our debut authors. Our next reader is Padraig Hogan, and this is the thought that came to me upon reading his first story in his collection, Wax. I was remembering one time driving through the Mojave Desert with my father, and I was having a bit of a freak out because my 5-year-old self saw that it was a 2-lane highway, and the hood of the truck was taking up both lanes from my very small perspective. And I was terrified when there was a car coming, and I thought, it's over, and I'm bracing myself, and then the car passed through us like a ghost. And I was looking, what? The reason that my point is, when I was reading the opening story of Padraig's collection, I was really delighted by the deftness with which he recreates this kind of Swiss cheese logic of youth. The logic that comes from learning physics from cartoons and not yet having a firm grasp on perspective or how cause and effect really works, its potential for menace and irreversibility. In his story, Blaine, we follow a kid on the cusp of knowing better who leads a herd of younger kids on an ill-advised trip beyond that fence. You know the one, the fence, the wall, the house, the forest that all the kids know about. It's haunted, or it's rumored to enclose a psychopath who eats pinky fingers or something. The kids, quote, stood on their toes and craned their necks too, but they thought him being taller meant he could see something they couldn't. Alongside Padraig's portrayal of the inner lives of human beings in mid-development, he draws us across a line of delineation, the fence, and the all-important absence of fence that we traverse, after which we are never the same. Padraig Hogan is an author and musician from the foothills outside Yosemite, California. He graduated from Fresno State with a degree in English and philosophy, and from the California Institute of Arts with an MFA in creative writing. His debut collection of short stories, Wax, was published by Querencia Press in 2022. He currently resides in Las Vegas, Nevada with his cat Logan, which makes me realize his cat is named Logan Hogan. Could have left it off the, yes. It's my honor to introduce Padraig Hogan.
Hello. I won't be reading Blame, so if you want to know what happens in it, you'll have to go buy one. But I'll be reading a few stories from my collection here. This first one is called Appraisal. The appraiser sat by the window of the Crossroads Motel, another in the string of cheap lodgings Gerald utilized nightly. As soon as she spoke, she saw his body tense. Although he was facing away from her, the appraiser could imagine just what was happening. She'd seen it countless times before. The way he tried to rationalize a voice at this hour of the morning by letting the red glow of the digital clock blind him until his eyes adjusted. The way he wondered if it had been the television he'd left on to help him sleep. Though no seedy establishment like this would have TV speakers nice enough to resonate the way her voice did. The way he wondered if he'd actually heard his own name. Additionally, the appraiser was on the opposite side of the room from the television, quite by design. Then there was the way Gerald tested his mattress to see if he could roll over without the springs giving him away. Calling himself a coward in his head, knowing it was ridiculous to assume anyone was in the room talking to him, but still refusing to roll over, finally gaining the courage to turn on the lamp, still not rolling over. Sometimes her boss complained that theatrics like this were part of the reason she was so far behind, but if she couldn't have fun on the job, what was the point? What made all of this worthwhile was the squeal of shock every middle-aged man made when they finally had the guts to roll over. Gerald was no exception. From his vantage, as with those who came before him, Gerald saw the figure of a woman in a suit that didn't just say professional, but said intentional, holding a clipboard bursting with papers. From her chair, she saw Gerald, a man who opted for all personal relationships to be business relationships, and all business relationships to die with the onset of night. When he rolled over and jumped back, it took all she had in her not to smile. Jared Holloway, she paused. Do you remember that night? Do you remember your offer? This was another one of her little cruelties. Even among those she appraised who did remember, most could not recall with the immediacy she required, not when waking from a dead sleep to find a stranger in their room. Gerald was the exception in this case, though. He remembered much of what he had said on the night of his graduation, alcohol aside. High school held some of the most vivid memories since it was the last time he did anything memorable. Gerald, at just 17, you offered to sell your soul to someone very powerful. In exchange for this soul, you wanted to play music for a living. More specifically, she flipped through the pages on her clipboard, though they could have been blank, as all the information she needed was already in her head. You wished to play rock music. You were sitting in the car with one William Perez, drinking beer and testing his new speakers. I have a quote if you'll indulge me. Billy, listen, man. I'd sell my soul to play guitar like him. Imagine the tale he pulls, man. Not that I'm doing too bad in that department, but going town to town like that, no strings, man, no strings. And it just sort of keeps going on like that from there. Afterward, you threw a beer bottle at a passing car, which you missed. But a bit later, a man gets a flat tire from the glass and is late to the birth of his daughter. Gerald, do you understand what I'm doing here? He leaned against the headboard, taking in the figure before him, controlling his breathing to steady his heart rate. He recognized that if he were in danger, it was not within his power to prevent it. Besides, in his line of work, he was used to hearing eccentric people tell long-winded stories, though they were more often about their own lives and not his. Taking this opportunity to speak Though unsure what to say, he opted for his go-to with high-tension conversations. My friends just call me Jerry. Who? The appraiser flipped through the pages on the clipboard again. Listen, Gerald, she continued. Is it still for sale or not? There's a whole process to this, and we're not getting any younger. I mean, only one of us is aging, but you take my point. No one had ever laughed at that joke, but to her, it was almost better that way. She never gave up on telling it. Gerald took stock of his belongings. His suitcase for clean clothes and his other suitcase for dirty laundry, his beat-up car parked outside, mocking him every time it took a couple tries to get started. His trunk of wares, a vague collection of artifacts, antiques, cure-alls, poisons, instruments, utensils, self-help books, the latest technology, tools, tonics, toys, weapons, and anything else he could convince the average person they always needed, but didn't know they were missing before having met him. It was an honest living, even if it wasn't really honest and wasn't really a living. So you're saying I can sell my soul and become a famous musician just like that? Gerald's experience as a salesman had made him skeptical of anyone else trying to sell him anything, but especially something that seemed too good to be true. That's what I'm here to find out, but I need your permission to examine it before I can say for certain. Gerald hesitated. What do you need from me? Almost as soon as he asked, the appraiser ripped out a paper from the clipboard and passed it to Gerald along with a pen. This is your basic appraisal consent form. Gives me access to the contents of your soul without handing over ownership. Need you to initial here saying you alone have full ownership of the soul in question, or have been given permission from the owning party to sell it. Here saying you understand that having a soul appraised is not a guarantee that a deal will be made to the satisfaction of both parties. Here saying you are not in possession of another soul, and that the one being appraised is your one true soul with which you were born. Here to waive the appraisal fee as part of our new Millennium Special, and here to confirm your name is spelled correctly. Then just sign and date. The appraiser whistled and spun around in her chair as Gerald took the time to read each section in full, something most clients didn't bother to do. But once he had, he did as he was told. Okay, excellent. Now lie back on the bed. This shouldn't hurt, but the first time is usually a bit overwhelming. It's better to not run the risk of you falling. Gerald scooted out flat. First time, do I have more than one soul? No, of course not. Sometimes people's souls just aren't what they should be, so they opt to raise their values before selling. Try to get a better deal. Of course, they usually die before they get a second appraisal, with the queue being what it is now. It's not like when Elvis saw Chuck Berry and a week later I was having him sign the same papers. Now we have the appraiser strike outsourcing duties to the damned, which let me tell you, it takes so long to train them to do anything, you might as well just have the trainers become the appraisers. It's why it took 30 years to get to you. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with bureaucracy. Hold still. The appraiser held her palm flat over Gerald's chest. For a moment, nothing happened, but all at once, the appraiser withdrew her hand and held it in a ball of swirling light. Gerald felt weightless, like he could float away if he allowed it, lightheaded, but with a distinct and clear focus. Gerald's soul felt cool in her hand. Through it, she could see a lifetime of decisions, intentions, outcomes, doors held open for strangers, red lights ran, heartfelt compliments, unsolicited attention. All thoughts and actions lay bare before her in an instant. Gerald, I'll be honest with you, your soul wasn't worth much when you offered it at 17, but now there's almost nothing to go off of here. You'd have better luck becoming a rock star if you let me run your credit score, which, she turned the soul to the side and focused her eyes, I didn't even realize could go below 300. The soul grew brighter as more was revealed, drowning out the dim yellow of the bedside lamp. What felt cold to the appraiser bathed Gerald in warmth. He was calmer than he had been all his life. She took one last look into the soul before closing her fist around it, diminishing the light. As it returned to Gerald's body, he felt all its weight. His chest felt heavy with the familiar sorrow he had not known was there until it was gone. Listen, Gerald, let me be direct. You're not going to become some big celebrity. The value isn't there. There's no return on investment. But hey, we're always happy to work with clients. This isn't an all-or-nothing business. Gerald was only half listening. He was overtaken by the way he had felt moments before, that freedom. Do you know what a cover band is, Gerald? I think if I made a couple calls, I could convince them to let you get good enough to play a bar somewhere, on Friday nights even. You just have to find a nice place to settle down. Not a lot of touring for cover bands. Though the Fab Four made a few million at this point, it says in the handbook not to play Genie, but sometimes I can't help it. I'd sell my soul to play like the Beatles, like, come on, you're asking for that to be misinterpreted. Gerald turned to look at the appraiser in the eye. How do you take my soul? Is it the same as just now? The appraiser smiled. The very same, only when I close my hand, it's gone forever, even out of my own reach. So I would just feel, he trailed off. He tried to return to even a modicum of that weightlessness. Yes, the appraiser realized what he was asking. Though frowned upon, this was a recognized and valid reason to accept a soul. There was a reputation to uphold, and even if consensual, word getting out that they were taking souls in exchange for nothing would damage the brand, or not feel. She tore another paper from the clipboard and held it to him, this time with no pen. Just press your thumb against the paper. Toward the bottom of the page was a slight indent, a needle, which would draw just enough blood to bond the sale. The appraiser watched Gerald's chest rise and fall as he measured the pressure of each breath. Her eyes moved to his face as he turned to match her gaze. He smiled, a smile she returned before their faces fell flat. For the first time since she arrived, both of them noticed the soft voices of the television as it cut to commercial. Thank you. This next one is called Chair. The chair came from a schoolhouse that had been closed decades before, and even then it had begun to rust. But these days, years of weathering had made the metal unrecognizable. Placed in the yard against the fence, away from the house, before he was even born. A place for his father to sit and think, a tradition intended to be passed down, even if by force. His father sending him to that chair for all manner of reasons, without regard to the state of the world, without regard for the climate or weather. When the child needed correcting, the chair was the place for correction. Made of hardwood, splintered, its coating long faded in all places that weren't kept from the elements. The curve of the seat cracked in a way that started to give if you favored one side or the other, encouraging him to learn to misbehave on the beautiful days, keep secrets of his indiscretions until the rain stopped or the summer sun was setting. Even though he tried more than once to destroy the chair, sometimes when he was sent there, sometimes on his own accord, anticipating what may come, each time his father making him fix it, reinforce it, make stronger what he harmed, just out of grasp of a further destruction. But as he felt as it was his father's chair, it was his father's job, especially since he was barely tall enough to see over the mower or strong enough to push it forward over the rough terrain with invisible holes hiding even more invisible creatures. But his father assigned it to him each summer to keep the yard mown, and what better punishment than a trudge through the weeds in his shorts and long socks, catching stickers as they burrowed through his leg hairs and into his skin, a sharp pinch with every step. The summer sun adding sweat, adding salt, adding irritation, his face burning and his eyes watering each time he rubbed his hands through them. More and more attaching to his calves. This is the reason he wore jeans deep into the summer, but not today, and not when he thought he had more time. But his father attached him to that seat earlier and earlier each year, school having only just ended, not even a path to use left by deer, foxes, or coyotes, just weeds folding over each other, the ground still soft with the last bits of moisture, and he sits in that chair and cleans off his legs and tries to remember if any of the pain felt deeper or more pronounced than the rest, and then wondering if it really matters whether he noticed it or not when it happened, because what mattered is there were 2 puncture marks just above his ankle, and the way they bled different, and the way in the hot summer breeze the path he took to get there was already blowing upright, and in the distance sat his father by the back door, having placed a chair from the kitchen, flicking his cigarette into his coffee before taking a sip. Thank you. And then this last piece is called Goodwill. There's little use in sentimentality, at least that's what the banker tells me. His watch, he paid more for it than I'm behind on my mortgage, and he checks it while I ask him a question about eviction, but he corrects me, tells me it's a foreclosure, uses the phrase squatter's rights, tells me to talk to my lawyer, even though I already told him there's no public defender for this kind of thing. This conversation is boring him, I can tell. For me, it's life or death. For him, it's a missed tea time. So I have to tell the family, if it doesn't fit in the van, it doesn't go. Our second car, we had to sell it just to keep the house as long as we did. So we have 48 hours until we're trespassing on bank property. And it's my little girl who has the bright idea to pawn our stuff, except we'd never be able to afford it back. So maybe we donate it. We're packing boxes full of toys and gifts and writing "I wish" and "Here's hoping," and we're dropping everything off at Goodwill on the dream that our things only have value to us. We see some of our nicer things we bought for last Christmas maybe, and it all still looks too new. So my little girl, she takes her dollhouse, the prize gift from that year, and she throws it down the stairs. She sits on it and bounces and bends the plastic as best she can. My wife, she's taking out single screws from our electronics, removing the springs from the battery terminals. My son opens all of our board games and takes out the main pieces, keeps them in his pockets. We go to work mangling our luxuries just enough. It becomes a family game figuring out how to trick them. We take our bed sheets, stain them yellow and brown and red with food coloring, All of our pots and pans, we run huge scratches through the non-stick coating. We crack the glass in our picture frames and keep our own photos in them. If it was painted, we scuffed it. If it was sewn, we tore it. If it meant something to us, we destroyed it. Thank you.
Patrick's book is Wax, available out here. Definitely support our debut authors. Pick up a copy. Again, leave reviews. Hype up these wonderful efforts from our first book folks. Pilar Graham, our final reader for this session. I had the pleasure of being a classmate of Pilar's back in the day. We suffered through some classes that had things like, why don't we read 20 novels in one semester, including Ulysses? I know you're going, shh, I heard it. Pilar Graham is the author of the poetry collection Currents, published by Tourane Poetry Press, and this was in 2022. Her poetries appeared in Sundog, Haunted Waters Press, Indent Literary Journal, Finishing Line Press, and Blackberry, among others. She's also published some creative nonfiction essays, and speaking to her earlier, I got the feeling she might be sharing some of her new work as well. Pilar served as a literary editor and a judge for local and national writing competitions, and earned her MFA in Creative Writing Poetry from Fresno State. And she teaches at California State University, Monterey Bay, and Fresno City College. She is currently seeking publication for her collection of essays, Burn Scars, a series of confessions in love, loss, and survival while traversing across the physical, emotional, and spiritual landscapes against a backdrop of wildfires in California. Pilar's collection, Currents, also available in the front. We've got you guys. Is at once a deep dive into the disorientation of loss. It is advice for seafaring. It is, above all, a searchlight scanning the stormy ocean for what survives this loss. In the poem Wild Beauty, a bird smashes against a window, and yet she writes, outside, there is nothing dead found, only me, and then a line break. Pilar writes of an oceanic youth, of hours passing hard as quartz, of summer as feather moving past the aviary, of the 100 years that have passed since the construction of the vanity. She writes of the quiet part of sexuality, the reflexively stunned gaze. This collection is testimony, love, remembrance, as told from a blue velvet couch that sags from the course of things, drips, dramatic pause, drips like a basin, forcing us to the center. It's my pleasure to introduce Pilar Graham.
Thank you, Angela. It's great. I was like, where is this person? Who is she? It's great. Yes, Currents was 16 years in the making. And yeah, it is a testimony for sure. I'm going to read 2 poems out of Currents, and then I'm going to read some poems out of a current collection, almost ready for publication, of full-length poetry. And it's called, that book is going to be called Falling. So from Currents, I'll start. So this poem has an epigraph that I wrote, so just write it instead of find one sometimes. A testimony, ocean wild, for my father. We have no names for this. Colors fraction into more colors. The spectrum reveals beauty after it separates from its outside, removed from any rogue wave or current that pulls us apart. We return back to our home shores. It's a story of a father, which includes the uncharted narratives subject to marital separation, and before someone had to claim they had to write it for all of us, the ones on the outside looking in. This isn't oral tradition or blended autoethnography. Instead, this is a result from mostly the matchless explanations or quiet moments that manage to sink beneath the surface by the weighted tongues and an immersion of truth who tied thief knots on the song. Instead, this is my testimony, being the firstborn, my father's third and final marriage, after I agreed to be released, head first, during the summer of love, and into the ocean wild. I hear myself say the word, wait, don't release me yet. I am 9 and visiting my father. He shows me the proper way to make a boat knot just before the security unwinds, and the rowboat is released. There are different ways to drift, all which require my full attention. Make a note of a landmark on shore. This is your starting place, a type of home base. Pay attention. Later, you will need your strength to row back from where you started from. I learned to yield to the waves, even after nautical lessons. Safety is subject to being mixed with motion. I try to remember this as I glide further across the Atlantic and look back at my father, who is still standing and watching over me, even though he has become a blurry dot I wave to that stands at the end of the dock. Okay. Okay, so this next poem is pretty self-explanatory. So it's called The Sound of Everything. There are sounds, as with any death. Colossal voices speak their last earthbound messages through the body right before the pulse stops, like the way the oxygen raced and pounded through my mother's lungs right before her heart attack. 2 framed pictures of hummingbirds on the bedroom wall are at my back. They are in flight. I work to breathe life into her, my hands hearing the center of her chest crack. The 911 operator tells me this is normal, but there is nothing normal about this sound as it mixes with my pleas for her to come back. Only days earlier, I remember the sweetness as we stood in the kitchen. It was the sound of surrender, with yellow onions and how they gave way to their circular rings, an offering using their spiral bodies, neither of us noticing the pungent sighs rising from the cutting board, the knife never reaching the heart. This is the sound we make when we smack our lips in the ritual of our informal dinner, mutual words unspoken, our eyes locked in proud agreement, having added onions to the meal based off something you read, that onions contain something special, a type of molecular protection for our hearts. This is the sound of my father and how he is bored to death in his old age, and how it can shade the sun that he has carried for over 91 years. Now our identities have become too heavy and out of place in California, like the 21-foot Bayliner that craves its belly in lake water. The engine is now quiet, living alongside your house. Your grief won't speak anymore about mom's death. Now it's time to sell the boat. This is the sound of me vacuuming my mother's room, the place on the carpet where you stood before you collapsed and died. Amongst the noise, I live with survivor's guilt, between all the types of death, until I enter a suspension of reality, tucked inside a mild vibration of my former self, and listen to the volumes of instructions until it all begins to dim and is no longer audible in this life. That's from Currents. I'll read some new stuff. So this is from a new manuscript. Drafts, so bear with me, drafts. Good stuff though. Dating tree rings, from Dating Tree Rings. I can't remember the year when I could not wait, so I ate for love. I moved under the California bark as a wood-boring beetle, marking the trails only to count the growth, the rings of the tree, you and me, where 2 souls osculate and split, stories from unspoken past, finally. Hollow me out so we can find life. Fashion me with your hands. Cut me to the ground. A wellspring of joyous sound found. You will find me here, post-scored. Now love sanded smooth. Together from all the years past, homesick, tree sick, love sick. Each ring a cycle, from where this tree, from where we stand in this moment, feel the goodness of the grain, my body now vulnerable at best. This is a segmented poem, again, a new one for Falling, a collection Falling, segmented into 3 sections, like a sword. It's called Blade. 1. Locusts are in the garden of my senses around the olive tree. Lumber arrives in a gift of split trees under the passing of black clouds where lightning, the mechanic says, is always part of thunder, and says to me I was taller when I dropped my truck off 9 hours ago. Yet my heels to sandals have not changed my height when I watch myself grow taller in front of you, or how I hold my hand and create a shield for my forehead. With all there is, with all the raindrops stealing my attention within this indescribable moment, wet with high musk scent. 2. Locust looks a bit like L-O-V-E, but this one is no longer solitary and against the nature of their history or the order of things. Even in this migration, where bug-eyed omens swarm in their seasonal signs in current time, yet it could be possible the wrath of God from all 10 plagues is finally beginning to lift. 3. I stack the collapsed boxes, moving around the one-dimensional darkness and the looming contents of California, dry of wild honey, where here not even the locust can claim a king. I reach back to the homeland along the Mississippi River, where the annual bluegrass lives amongst the white cedars and osprey, who fly above the fox snakes and rule over the yellow bass, becoming splinters of a sconded light beneath the surface of river generations, where Catholic churches join together like milkweed and braid themselves tightly inside the safety of your smile, or the wind where destination fails to be translated while you dance around the sword, either at the pommel or the point, and perhaps lost to the sound, since any courage is likely to look different to each man. This one's called Living Trust. It's about my father. Living Trust. It's about grief. Light yourself on fire in the kitchen, but only if you mean it. Otherwise, learn to point the flame towards the tea light where you signal solace. Face forward, repeat the prayers. Life will find a way to grow, even while it builds a nest on the sun's back, on the net of madness, and the light shout out, turn it off. I work to decipher the narratives in my hand, a gallery, black and white photos, 1944. Before my father begins the family route, before the second coming of my quiet absence, before I chose to become an egg, you've departed now, you see all. Candle me with flame as you did when you were 15 years old, tucked away in the back room of the A&P, a local market in our Michigan, egg after egg. When you knew how to separate the ones in front of you, knew how to separate the bad from the good. You're dying, you say, remain here, amongst the life and with the rest on earth, even with those who have failed living with trust, choosing their cosmic lessons for the afterlife. All right, this one's called Before You Leave. Remember to take the useless rifle and break it against the tree. Even in solitude, you can follow your way back to camp. Watch out for the wolfish and what the snares found, left behind by the wilderness beasts. Now you are the scouting party. In order to survive, you will learn to put the bridle reins in your teeth if you have to. You hear along the way distant family members saying, "You're the archivist of the family." Days later you read, quote, "The fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies another," end quote. And I'm going to end with my title poem for my next collection of poetry, All Falling. Okay, here we go. You guys ready? Catch me by the tree stump, with my hand outstretched now, against the 5 rings of growth, my fingers fanned and flattened against my only visible senses. If time could include, and only in remnants of dust, this powdery memory of mulch, or how longing can scatter and become the focus when facing the ground. Yet I don't think about the 3 types of tears, since the eternal will wipe them away, or at least may grow anemones and cover the surface with isolation when it attempts to carve itself down to a number, after it whittles away using cuts without any measure, and after, apart from this reality, and later the derealization will settle in from the crosscut of this couch, and sightlines from the window begin to curve towards the forestry of green hips, a wilderness, a body, my body, and how even the earth is always bending against its own gravity and constantly falling, or how even a fixed horizon can suspend the heaviest of weight, becoming a winded denial, or how I might represent to you as if I would be different, instead merely a variation of another sin, a temptation that finds life across the yellow rails, and has the ability to move back and forth and makes up for itself with sacred offerings behind the Virgin's back. As you edge walk after having already mastered a mendacious shape-shifting from the center of your bona fide heart against the terrain of risk, while I begin to mill the arrive of envy, of your ingrained restraint as I fall back against the earth to count the circles of spalted wood at the rise of today's dawn. Now nothing is one-dimensional. My body is falling for the first time against the skin of the drum. Thank you.